When people are forced to flee their home countries, where do they go? And who's there to help them? The first thing that we often think of is that they're headed to the US or Canada or to Europe. And of course, some of the times that's the case. But as my guest today will remind us, there is a current refugee crisis going on right now that's affecting countries and communities around the globe. The need is great, and the human suffering that is created as a result of this crisis is unimaginable. And that's why Tanya Mroczek-Amador, her family, and her team have chosen to do everything they can to help these precious people through their organization that's called Corner of Love. So Tanya is my guest today. I hope you'll stick around to get to know her and the organization Corner of Love on today's edition of the Edge of Adventure podcast. Tanya Mroczek-Amador, welcome to the program.
Hi, Adam. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Tanya, so good to see you again. Tell me, first of all, how is the refugee crisis as the refugees flee Nicaragua and I know also Venezuela?
Well, coronavirus has really done a number on the situation here in Costa Rica and also Colombia for refugees and vulnerable families. There's just more people than ever, and a lot of people trying to get back to Venezuela or get back to Nicaragua and find themselves stranded. So we're dealing now with not just hunger, but also homelessness, which is really tough.
So the crisis existed prior to COVID, right? So the refugees were already leaving Nicaragua. They were already leaving Venezuela. It was a really bad situation. Then you add COVID on top of that, and it's complicated it even more. What are the types of scenarios that the people were fleeing from the begin with? They're pouring out of the countries. How many are we talking? What was the situation like?
Well, in Costa Rica, numbers vary, but most of the experts talk of about 100,000 or a little more than 100,000. Now, you have to remember that Costa Rica is a country that's always been historically receiving Nicaraguans for economic reasons, repression, et cetera, for the last several decades. So the presence of Nicaraguans here is really a lot higher than 100,000. But those 100,000 that are mentioned over and over are the ones who are most vulnerable, because those are the ones who entered Costa Rica from 2018 through today. And most of them were day laborers. The people that our programs benefit mostly worked, here or there, picked up a day or two, sometimes 3 days per week, a lot of informal employment. But then with the onset of COVID, everybody was told to stay home, right? Costa Rica has done a very good job managing the pandemic, but everyone is supposed to be staying home, and the country has largely shut down, although not a total official shutdown. And that through all of our, Nicaraguan and Venezuelan refugees, the huge majority of them into a deeper poverty, and things are very, very critical for them. Most of the people that we help are only eating 1 to 2 meals a day, and very unfortunately, I'd really have to say that probably the majority of them only 1 meal a day.
Tanya Mroczek-Amador joining us from Corner of Love on the Edge of Adventure podcast. Tanya, today you are in where? You're in Costa Rica, right? You guys have headquarters there in Central America now in Costa Rica, is that right?
Correct. I'm in San Jose today, and Corner of Love has 2 refugee centers here in Costa Rica. We have one up by the Nicaragua border in a small town called La Cruz. It's just about a 15-minute short drive to the border crossing there in Peñas Blancas. And that center distributes rice, beans, milk, cooking oil, etc. But a bigger function of it is actually providing what we call hero services, which is it's kind of like catering. So we've been bringing hot meals to the border where hundreds of Nicaraguans and Cubans have been basically camping out right at the country line. And today there's still a group of Cubans. They're now in the Costa Rican government's camp called CATEM. But there have been other moments where these groups have swelled to 200, 300, 400, even over 500 in the case of the Nicaraguans in July, right at the country line. And they were just covering themselves with black plastic and eating out of their backpacks. And so Corner of Love began providing 2 hot meals for them while they waited because the Nicaraguan government wouldn't let them into their own country.
Tanya, what do you think? Obviously, food has to be one of those, but what do you think one of the greatest needs are that the refugees have that you see over and over again?
I would say direct financial assistance at this time to pay their rent because, we don't want them to get evicted. And a lot of them are dealing with that. And they have small children. They end up on the streets of Costa Rica, and that's not what we want. But outside of these times of coronavirus, I would say they need medical help. They need someone to believe in their dreams. We talk with them a lot about having one goal, one sustainability goal, and then Corner of Love trying to walk next to them to support that one goal. So it may be, for instance, someone who is a carpenter in Nicaragua and their short-term goal right now is just to acquire the tools that they need to work in that same industry. Or it may be, a lady who her one goal is to get into school, but she lacks her proper documents to actually register with a university in Costa Rica. So I think listening to them and being willing to walk with them regarding their one sustainability goal, and in the meantime providing medical dental care and food supplies because they just lack basically all basic needs. It's really a very sad situation. It's really hard to keep a level head because there's so many good people who they just don't have their basic needs. They don't have shoes. They don't have a backpack. They don't have money to get from one bus station to another stop.
So Corner of Love, Tanya, started when and why? What was it that got you guys motivated to serve in this way?
Well, we started officially in the year 2000 in the Matagalpa area of Nicaragua, but you could say that unofficially we got going in the year 1992 because that was the first time that my husband Nelson and I traveled to Nicaragua. He had gone into exile in the 80s with the first round of all of the Sandinista troubles in the 80s, and so he returned to Nicaragua in 1992 with me. And we did do a little bit of mission activity on that very first visit. Even though we were there for a family wedding, we did distribute some blue jeans and some other things and started to open our eyes. So our official start was the year 2000 and mostly working in the Matagalpa region of Nicaragua, although we did do visits to lots of other places and very, very familiar with the whole country of Nicaragua. But we did work in just one country. So from 2000 to 2018, just in that one nation of Nicaragua. And then fast forward to now, the last 2 years, we have been growing into an international ministry. And now we're helping people, primarily Venezuelans and Nicaraguans, although also some Cubans and some refugees from Angola and other places, Haiti as well, but really primarily Venezuelans and Nicaraguans, but now in Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, and pretty soon Honduras as well, Panama as well, basically just helping out refugees that left since 2018 or earlier in the case of Venezuela in a lot of different Latin American countries.
So for example, in the work in Mexico, is that with refugees or that's a humanitarian scenario that's different, that's not refugee based?
In the case of Mexico, what we have are numerous Nicaraguan families all supporting Nicaraguans living in Mexico today. And there are people awaiting asylum trial, getting ready, preparing their families for some type of a court date. But in the meantime, they're waiting there close to the US border. We also have a couple other families in Mexico City, and all of them have fled Nicaragua due to the repression in 2000 that started in 2018 because of the civic uprising. And so we're basically just helping try to keep them afloat because they aren't able to get into the US right now. They're awaiting their court date and they've got nothing to eat. And those situations in Mexico are some of the most heartbreaking because there just isn't a Nicaraguan community there at all to lend any support. Whereas at least here in Costa Rica, again, you have that history of Nicaraguans coming to this country for many decades. In Mexico, that's not really the case. It's so much further north. So they're very, very alone. And one family that comes to mind, they have two small little boys, and they're living there in just a makeshift home very close to the U.S. border, and just breaks my heart. Just breaks my heart. I mean, the little boys are not even in school because of the very unstable situation.
Talking today with Tanya Mroczek-Amador of Corner of Love, and they are working in Costa Rica. They're working in Colombia, in both of those locations, helping to care for refugees leaving Nicaragua, and Venezuela, also now working in Mexico, and I think soon in some other countries as well. What's the hardest thing to see, the hardest thing to witness in all this?
I think the hardest thing is the family separation. Listening to people who haven't been able to see their families now in 18 months, 2 years. And when they tell us about that and how much they miss, their husband or mother or children, tears always flow. And that sometimes makes it really hard for us to, keep listening and keep trying to stay in the conversation without becoming emotional ourselves as well. So we try very hard to reunite families wherever we can. We actually have some employees that was the very first thing we did, was reunite their families. So even though they were going to be working for Corner of Love, and that part was secure for them, we wanted to bring their kids and wife or kids and husband to be with them so that they could be together. So and we've duplicated that with a couple other refugees as well. It was a big plan of ours for 2020, actually, to reunite more families, but then coronavirus struck, and now all travel is at a standstill. So we hope to get back to that in 2021. But I believe that to date, we've helped reunite just over 50 families, I think maybe 51 or 52 families. And that's very special when they can, come together and start thinking about what the future is like, and I think getting over that hump of being very stuck in the past and what has happened, because so much has happened to them, right? With everything that went on in Nicaragua, and so many people who lost loved ones, were shot at, there was torture, people jailed, and on and on and on, all of the different crimes against humanity committed in that country. And so a lot of people, they just keep talking about what has happened to them. But once they're able to be with their family, I think they can begin to think about the future, and they start having some conversations that look forward, and that gives us a lot of hope.
Tanya, a Corner of Love, I know, does so much. And one of the things that has always struck me about your organization is the level of efficiency and the way that you guys reach so many people, the maximum number of people in the minimum amount of time, right? You guys are always moving quickly, and you're providing these very basic needs. Help put that into perspective for us as you think of the things that you guys are doing and have done over the last several years. What's the primary type of assistance that you guys focus on right now, and how are you getting it to the people?
Thanks so much for saying, Adam. We really appreciate your comments. I think the secret to our success has been always using Native coordinators. So we have always been quick to figure out who is a Native leader in which area, and then vet that person and decide whether or not they can help Corner of Love. And most of the time they sure can, right? And then empower them to help us do the work to begin getting information to our organization about what people need, where they are they working, are they not working, and bringing that all into one central heart of Corner of Love, so that we can then look at our supply and say, all right, all these people who don't have shoes in Guapiles, we can get them over there. These folks who need to be fed up at the border, we can open up our industrial kitchen and start feeding them. But really the secret to the success is partnering with natives. So today we work with Venezuelans and Nicaraguans who know the different people groups very, very well. And they're able to do a lot of the groundwork so that when Corner of Love arrives, we're getting specific items to specific people and in big numbers. So today we have our new refugee center that's in the capital here in San Jose that distributes emergency food bags every single day. We're open every single day. Also do home visits in all of these urban sprawling neighborhoods all over Costa Rica's capital. And all of that is possible because of these native coordinators who they have a heart for refugees, just like Nelson and I do. You know, we may be the founders, but they're the beating heart that's out there in all of these different communities. And we're just very thankful for them. And a lot of them have gone through a lot in Venezuela and Nicaragua, and maybe they can't be as public as we can for a number of reasons. But they would do anything for their countrymen. And so I think really just putting the tools into their hands for them to help is the big secret to success.
Tanya, tell us what's happening in this picture here. For those of you who are listening to the audio version of the podcast, again, I'm a radio guy and I love the audio version of these things. It's kind of my zone. But of course, we live in a very video-centric age. And if you want to hop over to YouTube, hop over to Facebook, you'll be able to see on the Edge of Adventure platforms some of the pictures. And I've been sharing some moving video and pictures. But this one caught my attention because here's you. This is you. And this is, I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but this is obviously during this time of COVID. All right. What's happening here? What are you guys distributing in this particular picture?
This is a very special picture. I'm really glad that you brought this up because we recently hosted Venezuela's ambassadors. That's the Venezuelan ambassador, Maria Faria in Costa Rica, and the Venezuelan ambassador in Honduras, Claudio Sandoval. And they were brought to Corner of Love's facilities and toured all of our facilities here in Costa Rica, and we were able to bring them up to serve at the Nicaragua border. And on that day, Corner of Love was providing meals to a group of Cubans, and they were just camping right there with tents on the side of the road, about 200 people, mothers, children, infants, elderly, etc. And both of the ambassadors were extremely moved to see this stranded people group there. And they jumped in to help and actually began serving. So in black next to me, that's Ambassador Maria Faria. And then to my left is Ambassador Claudio Sandoval. And it was a very emotional day for them. Even though they see a lot of things as ambassadors and they've lived a lot of things in Venezuela as well, I think that's kind of Corner of Love's strong suit, is being able to bring our volunteers and our special guests right to ground zero of the hurt. And so we began serving oatmeal and bread, and I think there we're doing tea. And right away, the Cubans started talking about what they've lived in Cuba, which is very similar to Nicaragua and Venezuela. We know that Cuba is basically the cancer that has moved this awful, these awful policies throughout Latin America. And so it was just like a ditto, just like a broken record, just listening to people talk about situations in Cuba that could have been Nicaragua, could have been Venezuela. And I think all of us, Claudio and Maria and myself, the three of us just looked at each other and we were just like, wow, this is just, it's just the same pain, the same script. And it was a very powerful day. And in fact, that day led to further projects that I'm working on right now with Venezuela, and I'm super excited about that.
Tanya, there's a lot of different things you could be doing with your time. You're a very talented person, got a lot of skills. You have devoted your life to this. Why?
There's just, the simple answer is that this is what God has called me to do. I honestly feel like every time I can get something done, especially for Nicaragua, it's just a country that I would do anything for that country. And whenever we're able to move a little bit towards more human rights for Nicaraguans and a better life for Nicaraguans. It just completely energizes me. It motivates me, but I do it for the Lord. I consider myself a servant of God, and I really do, without wanting to sound too radical, feel like I hear him. I hear God saying, go this way, go that way, help this person, grow here, shrink here. And that's what Corner of Love is doing. And today there's a very specific need to raise this flag for these refugees who are they're not getting a lot of world attention, because most of them, with the exception of the ones I was talking about in Mexico, they're not knocking at America's door. These are people who are migrating through South and Central America. And, Canadians and North Americans don't know very much about this. And yet we're living a migration crisis right now where almost 6 million people, 6 million, not hundreds of thousands, not hundreds, 6 million people have left Venezuela and Nicaragua. Of course, most of them Venezuelan. And so there's just no doubt that God calls me to do this work, and he calls me to each place where we step, and we're still hearing him, and he's still growing this mission. And that gives us a lot of, that just really affirms us in our decisions right now at this time.
I'm sure you deal with a lot of people, a lot of organizations, agencies that are not faith-based. How do they interact with Corner of Love and the fact that you are devoted to caring for people in need, refugees, people that are experiencing a humanitarian crisis? What's their reaction to your organization as you do those kinds of things?
Adam, that's a very good question, because we interface with United Nations and lots of different foundations here in Costa Rica, and also did in Colombia and Washington, D.C. as well. And yes, there are just a lot of, I would say, big organizations out there who may publicly be neutral, or may have, a set of ideals that are just completely, almost in conflict with our biblical principles. And so we've tried very hard to remain very diplomatic and friendly, but we are mindful that their missions are different than our own mission. And we are for the people and for helping raise their voice, especially those who have experienced repression. And there are a lot of organizations out there that they don't want to hear anything about repression. They don't want to hear anything about the human rights violations. They want to stick to just give them the beans and rice. And, we don't want to hear about the cause at all. And, we also don't want to hear about any growth in faith as these people go through this journey. And so that's okay. They have their mission and we have ours. But I think that's what makes Corner of Love so special, is that, we don't hide it at all, that we're a Christian organization, and we always ask if someone would like prayer. And we try very hard to put the tools in their hands for them to grow their faith while they're going through this very adverse situation. I think it really sets Corner of Love apart from all of these different organizations, because the refugees that we work with, there are a lot of them who say they consider us their pastors, and that's their way of thinking. But maybe more importantly, they know that we are Christ followers, and that's why we're their friends.
Tanya Mroczek-Amador joining us today on the Edge of Adventure podcast from Corner of Love. And as we've been discussing, they're working in a lot of different areas throughout Latin America. And I've known Tanya for a couple of years. I've watched the organization continue to grow and serve people as the needs have changed. They've adapted, and it's certainly an inspirational thing to watch. Tanya, as you address now, let's shift and start thinking about people throughout the West who might want to help Corner of Love. What are some of the ways they can? I know that groups used to be a big used to invite groups to come down and serve. Obviously, with COVID, that was probably delayed. But tell me, is there a timetable for getting that back in the mix, and/or how can people help now as things are?
Yeah. We're really excited to be announcing very soon that we'll be going forward with all of our 2021 trips. And it's going to look very different than other years. And we're going to offer complete flexibility and transferability so that if someone registers, they can, number one, if they end up not being able to go, they could transfer to a family member. Number two, we're going to be completely flexible. So if for any reason, they just say, I've got to go the next year, we're going to honor that as well. So it's going to be a very hop in, hop out mentality, because we think it's super important right now with what's going on with this global pandemic to help bring people back to serving. And the missions in groups is something that we really believe in. We just think that serving others and sacrificing yourself for a week and being at the service of the needy for 1 week, it changes hearts. And even though there's all these things that we have to do right now, we have to take temperatures and use gloves and of course have the alcohol hand sanitizer out all the time and be doing all these other protocol measures to keep everybody safe, we think it's worth it and it's time to go ahead and invite people back. And so pretty soon we'll be having on our website our one trip in January, February, March, and on. And things are going to look a little bit different, but we actually think that God's work is part of the solution to what's broken right now in North America and around the world. And we look forward to inviting our doctors and dentists back, and they'll be here soon.
So you say participating in these trips changes hearts.
Yeah.
How does it change a heart to get to serve in this way?
Well, just yesterday I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and after knowing him for a very long time, he came to serve with Corner of Love last July in Costa Rica. And he had donated for some time, but he had never actually been there in person as part of the mission team, distributing the medicine, hearing the people and their stories. And, a grown man in his 40s talking to me on the phone about how those were the most significant moments of his life. And in fact, his daughter who came with him, now wants to go into healthcare, and he signed up for a prayer retreat for next weekend. And, it really touched me. And that is just one example of people who they come, they work, and they don't just hear the pain. They, a part of it, actually, they internalize it, and they take with them those stories of the refugees and what happened to them. And it helps them in the short term as they get through, some of their own private difficulties. And in the long term, it just changes their outlook on life and helps them, come back to a place of gratitude and giving thanks to God for their blessings in their own life. And I just think that the power of service is like none other. And even during coronavirus, we've got to make a way to bring back the hands of God into this scenario where people can be the ones who are, giving away the hydrocortisone or the acetaminophen or washing feet of the little refugee kids who are getting a new pair of shoes. Pretty soon we're going to be giving out hundreds of backpacks. It just warms my heart to think about our volunteers coming back. And like I said, we're gonna have to just pick them up and drop them off whenever they can plane get here. But that's okay with us because we believe in that. And I know that people, they are different after they've spent this time with people who are so broken. They're so broken. These refugees have gone through horrific situations, and being able to help piece their life back together and call them your friend, a refugee friend, is a very special thing.
Tanya, what's one of the hardest things to witness? Perhaps the thing that breaks your heart the most in a situation like you see day in and day out?
I think one thing that breaks my heart is seeing the struggles. I mean, the very serious struggles of these displaced people, which sometimes causes them to lash out, to their friends or family. There's discord amongst the Venezuelan community or the Nicaraguan community at times. Other times it's less. And that's where those of us who, can bring Jesus' message into these different communities can help, and we do see things be better, go better when there's more visitation and when more people are opening their Bibles and we can work with them more, because it really distresses me when they have so little that sometimes it just causes people to it causes there to be more discord, more arguing, etc., amongst different people groups. So, just to kind of put that into context, I mean, if you have a group of Nicaraguans and a group of Haitians and a group of Cubans, and there's only enough food for 30 of the 100, well, what's going to happen? Well, without other people who can insert themselves into that scenario and give, find more bread or help counsel, sometimes, squabbles happen. And that just distresses me, mostly because more food is needed. Because basically what we're dealing with right now is a hunger pandemic. People are people are starving, and that's a hard thing to deal with in a country like Costa Rica that has been just all about tourism and pura vida for a long time. And yet you do have people here who literally do not have enough to eat.
This is the Edge of Adventure podcast. Tanya Mroczek-Amador is my guest today. We're getting close to the end of it here, but I want to ask a couple of other questions. Tanya, for the potential financial partner that's out there watching today, and this strikes a chord with them, and they think I need to help. I need in some way to be involved. Where do they go to find out more about that? And then when they make a donation, where does that money go?
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Adam. Yes, right now we have very big needs. We're outfitting 3 different containers at our Northern Refugee Center. One will be dedicated to dental services. We just finished a climate-controlled pharmacy at that same facility, and we're also working on another container that's for optical services. So we have big needs trying to outfit these refugee centers to do even more for these displaced families, and people can donate at corneroflove.org, and that way we'll be in touch and we'll be connected, and with their permission we'll keep giving them news about what's going on with Corner of Love and how they can continue to help. And I would say that, when people give, well, number one, they can designate. They can say, I want to give towards food, or I would like to give towards the dental container. I'd like to give towards medicine. We can definitely accommodate that. And number two, I would say that we are one of the very most direct charities out there. When people donate to Corner of Love, it is literally, going straight to these vulnerable families. I mean, we're right here on the ground, and we're completely transparent. People can come and visit us and see our 2 facilities, and see all of the prescription medicine and all of the emergency food bags, and see it with their own eyes. And I think that that's just a huge strength for us, that we are so direct, and it's just right from someone's their resources right to the person in need. So come on down, come visit us, or donate at corneroflove.org. Like I said, we'll stay in touch with you with your permission, and you'll get some more news from us, and keep watching your gift go forward and do more things, because God knows how to multiply it, put it that way.
All right, so I have 2 final questions. One, we're going to wrap up this little portion here in English, and then I'm going to ask you to address the audience in Spanish,
Okay.
because they love you so much, and we love them so much. I want to be sure we get some Spanish into to the recording. So, question now: what do you say, and what does the Western world, if your life? I mean, we all have our problems, we all have our issues, we all have the things that consume us, but so many of us have it so good. To the world out there that maybe has been very, very focused on themselves, and perhaps need to shift the focus to others, what would be your advice to those, and how can you encourage them? What's on the other side of that, when you take the focus off of you and you begin putting the focus on how you can help someone else, what happens?
Absolute magic. Lives are completely changed. And I think my message to people living in different countries, and I mean outside of Costa Rica or Colombia, where we are primarily working, would be number one, there's a mistruth out there. There's a mistruth that immigrants who reach US borders are more important than migrants moving throughout the rest of the world. That is a mistruth. There is too much focus on those who are able to reach, the U.S. border and possibly get in or not, and the rest of all of these displaced families. Because we're talking about 6 million people. Why is there not more attention on what's going on right now? This is the same, almost the same magnitude of World War II in Europe. It's reaching those numbers anyways. And so we need to dispel that mistruth, and we need to begin thinking way beyond our borders. And then number two, I would say that it's human nature to not want to be close to pain, to stay away from it, to not want to see images of people suffering. And yet that's what has the most potential to change our own lives. And so, get close to it. Get close to the need, the pain, the suffering. Sometimes, it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't even smell good when you're actually right there at a country line where there are hundreds of people. But we think that you all should. We think that you all should bridge that gap and come and actually, touch the pain and be with the people. Because it's just so life-changing, which is what we just were talking about. But this is a very, very big problem, and we need to dispel that long-standing mistruth that people that reach the United States or reach North America are in some way, their cases are more important. There should be more focus on them. We know that it's important to welcome vulnerable people and refugees at the U.S. and Canadian border, et cetera. But what about the rest of the world? What about these 6 million people and this huge migration crisis that's going on right now? I hope that whenever we open our mouths, people connect with that pain and all those people, because this is big. These are large numbers of mothers and fathers and children who are moving around Latin America and need help really bad.
My guest today on the Edge of Adventure podcast, Tanya Mroczek-Amador, joining us from San Jose, Costa Rica this morning, and the Latin American headquarters for Corner of Love. And to find out more information, we've been sharing this throughout the interview on the screen. But I want to be sure and mention that you can and you should connect with them at corneroflove.org, corneroflove.org. You can also look them up on Facebook, same sort of thing. Look for Corner of Love. It's a beautiful Facebook page, got a very vibrant and active following, and great pictures, great stories. Really helps you stay in touch and connected with the organization and the different areas and the different people that they're ministering to. For those of you that prefer Instagram or also like Instagram, hop on over there. You'll find them at corneroflove_global, corneroflove_global. And again, a great place to start, regardless. It's just at the website. Get to know them, and all the links that you need are there on the site, including how you can get involved, how you can participate in a trip and go down and help out in person. And that's going to be coming up in 2021 as we clear the pandemic. And then also great opportunities to give and to support and to come alongside them in some financial ways. So thank you, Tanya. Before we shift over briefly here to Spanish, I just want to thank you officially in English for your time today.
Thank
here
you.
on the podcast.
You do such great work. We so appreciate you reaching out. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tanya. Y ahora con nosotros, Tanya Mroczek-Amador, con nosotros aquí en el podcast de The Edge of Adventure, el borde de la aventura. Soy Adam Asher y gracias a todos ustedes por sintonizar, por ser parte de esto. Tenemos a mucha gente que nos escucha, que participa con nosotros, que habla español. Y me están siempre diciendo que tenemos que tener también entrevistas en español y por eso tenemos que aprovechar este momento con Tanya. Tanya, ¿cuál es el mensaje que usted tiene para la gente de Latinoamérica? Estamos pasando por momentos difíciles, muy difíciles por diferentes razones. ¿Cuál es el mensaje principal que usted tiene para la gente?
Hola, buenos días, Adam. Muchas gracias por tenerme en tu programa. Un lindo programa, me encanta estar contigo. Bueno, mi mensaje yo creo que para los que hablan español es que no nos podemos olvidar de estas personas que están migrando de Venezuela y Nicaragua por todo Latinoamérica. Hay nicaragüenses y venezolanos en muchísimos países de Latinoamérica y ellos se sienten olvidados. Entonces, mi mensaje de hoy sería tratar de pensar en estas personas. Son casi 6 millones de hombres, mujeres, niños que son vulnerables y están por muchos diferentes países, especialmente Costa Rica y Colombia, y es donde trabaja Corner of Love en estos dos países, además de también tener servicios en México, Panamá y Honduras y también, pero si pudieran ocupar una tarjetita o algo que pueden poner en su cartera que les hace pensar en estos 6 millones de migrantes, algo que les recuerde de sus sufrimientos y su jornada, eso es lo importante ahorita, que no quedan en el olvido estas 6 millones de personas, 6 millones, no cientos de miles, no cienes, sino 6 millones de personas que han migrado de Venezuela y Nicaragua también.
Muchísimas gracias, Tania. Yo sé que tenemos que volver a invitarle al programa para hablar 100% en español completamente también, porque
Lo vamos a hacer.
pues, va a ser importante. Pero por ahora, gracias por su tiempo. Yo sé que está ocupada, que está ahora con mucho que hacer y por eso yo aprecio el tiempo que ha tomado
Ahora,
para
muchas
compartir
gracias.
conmigo y con la gente la visión y el corazón de Corner of Love.
Gracias, Adam. Vamos a seguir en la lucha siempre y tratando de ayudar. Y gracias por levantar esta voz tan importante en tu programa para los migrantes.
My guest today here on the Edge of Adventure podcast, Tanya Mroczek-Amador. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for your friendship. And again, thank you for joining me for the program today. Muchísimas gracias, Tanya, por estar con nosotros. Su amistad me significa mucho. Y estamos en contacto. Gracias por todo lo que hace.
A ustedes, Adam, a ti y a tu equipo también, maravilloso por hacer este trabajo. Muchas gracias. Dios te bendiga, Adam.
Thank you all for joining us here for another edition of the Edge of Adventure podcast.